How did a man who had never built a ship become one of World War II's most famous shipbuilders and manage to construct a 441-foot cargo ship in just 4 days? Hello and welcome. This is WWII History Retold, where I dive into the real stories behind the legends of World War II. I'm not a professional historian, just a regular person who's gotten very interested in history. So if you enjoy this video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more World War II stories like this one. On November 12, 1942, astonished crowds at the Kaiser shipyard in Richmond, California, watched a brand new Liberty cargo ship, the SS Robert E. Peary, slide into the San Francisco Bay, only 4 days and 15 hours after its keel had been laid. This 441-foot vessel, weighing over 14,000 tons loaded, had been assembled in less than 5 days, an achievement that defied 3,000 years of traditional shipbuilding wisdom. Vice Admiral Emory Land, head of the U.S. Maritime Commission, admitted that just months earlier, he would have called this feat impossible. Yet here it was, a fully operational Liberty ship built in 1 work week, ready to sail. The spectators, naval officers, officials, journalists, and even rival shipyard owners were stunned. Many had expected a flimsy prop or a half-finished gimmick, but the SS Robert E. Peary was real and seaworthy. In the words of Admiral Land, industrialist Henry Kaiser had just made traditional shipbuilding methods obsolete by proving a ship could be built in days instead of months. This dramatic launch was more than a publicity stunt. It symbolized a revolution in wartime production. At a time when German U-boats were sinking Allied cargo ships at a terrifying rate, the United States desperately needed to build ships faster than they were being destroyed. Henry Kaiser, a man who, remarkably, had never built a ship before 1941, pioneered a radical new approach to ship construction that shattered all the old records. His methods turned shipbuilding into a rapid assembly line process, mobilizing an army of ordinary Americans to perform the impossible. Here is how Henry Kaiser, an outsider to the maritime industry, became one of WWII's most famous shipbuilders and managed to construct a 441-foot cargo ship in just 4 days. From dams to shipyards, Kaiser enters. Shipbuilding. Henry Kaiser was a successful American industrialist known for building roads, bridges, and massive dams, including the Hoover and Grand Coulee dams. But he had zero shipbuilding experience prior to World War II. In late 1940, as war raged in Europe, the British government was desperate for merchant ships to replace those sunk by German U-boats. The US Maritime Commission sought new contractors to build simple cargo ships for Britain under Lend-Lease. Kaiser boldly stepped forward. On December 20, 1940, Kaiser, partnered with Todd Shipyards, signed a contract to construct 30 ships for Britain at a new shipbuilding yard in Richmond, California. This was startling. Kaiser was not a shipyard owner or naval architect, and established East Coast shipbuilders openly scoffed at the idea that he could deliver. Many experts considered Kaiser a naive interloper, in over his head, good at pouring concrete but clueless about ship construction. They assumed shipbuilding required highly specialized knowledge passed down through generations, and Kaiser didn't have it. Undeterred, Henry Kaiser saw his lack of shipbuilding background as an advantage. Free from the shipwright's traditional way we've always done it, Kaiser approached ship construction with fresh eyes and a can-do problem-solving spirit. By early 1941, he set up Permanente Metals Corporation Shipyard No. 1 in Richmond and started hiring thousands of workers. Initially, he partnered with an old line firm, Todd, but Todd's conservative management couldn't keep up with Kaiser's ambitious pace and soon bowed out, leaving Kaiser in sole control. Kaiser began questioning every step of the standard shipbuilding timeline. In those days, building a single cargo ship took around 6 to 8 months, over 200 days, using sequential methods. That was far too slow, Kaiser insisted. A wartime emergency demanded faster production. How can we radically speed up ship construction, he asked. What if we completely rethink how ships are built? Breaking all the rules of shipbuilding. Traditional shipbuilding in the 1940s was a linear, labor-intensive process. A skilled crew would lay a keel, then gradually build the whole frame, riveting thousands of steel plates one by one, then adding decks, and finally installing engines and equipment once the hull was complete. This step-by-step process had lots of idle time, waiting for earlier stages to finish. Kaiser set out to break this bottleneck by applying modern mass production techniques, inspired in part by the auto industry's assembly lines. One of Kaiser's engineers, Clay Bedford, had visited Ford's River Rouge automobile plant in Detroit, and was struck by how cars were assembled from components in a continuous flow. Kaiser's shipyards, adopted a similar philosophy, modular prefabrication. Instead of building a ship piece by piece on the ways, Kaiser's yard would pre-assemble large sections of the ship in parallel at different locations, then join them together. Giant gantry cranes, which Kaiser installed in abundance, allowed whole 100-ton hull sections or even pre-outfitted engine rooms to be built separately and then lifted into place on the shipway. For example, one team could be welding a bow section, while another built the stern section and yet another assembled the midship's deckhouse or the engine module, all at the same time. When each chunk was ready, cranes would swing the block over to the main keel and lower it into position, where welders quickly fused it to the rest of the hull. This parallel workflow meant that tasks normally done sequentially were now done concurrently, shrinking the overall schedule dramatically. Kaiser essentially transformed ship construction into assembly of large prefabricated modules, a revolutionary idea in 1941. Another key innovation Kaiser embraced was switching from riveting to welding. Conventional shipyards still relied on thousands of rivets hammered by skilled crews to hold hull plates together. A slow, arduous process. A single Liberty ship required over 1 million rivets, if done the old way. Kaiser chose to use electric arc welding to fuse the steel plates, a technique he had seen in modern industrial projects. Welding had big advantages. It was faster, used less material, rivets added significant weight, and crucially it was much easier to teach to unskilled workers. A novice could learn to run a welding bead in weeks, whereas riveting took years of apprenticeship for a crew to master. By standardizing welding methods and designs, Kaiser's yards could churn out hulls with far fewer highly paid artisans. Welding did introduce new challenges. Early on, some Liberty ships developed hull cracks in cold waters due to brittle steel and weld issues, and a few even broke in half. This problem, initially alarming, was solved by adjusting steel quality and welding techniques by 1944, virtually eliminating such failures in later ships. Kaiser's radical approach to shipbuilding can be summarized by a few innovations he championed: modular assembly, building large ship sections, bow, stern, decks, etc., simultaneously in separate areas, then craning them into place for final welding. This parallel assembly vastly reduced idle time. Prefabrication and standardization, mass-producing uniform parts like preformed steel plates, pre-assembled piping sections, etc., in factories or on site, ready to be quickly installed. Ship designs were simplified for easy replication, rather than custom crafted. Welding instead of rivets, adopting welded seams to speed construction. Welding was faster and required less physical strength and skill, enabling the use of a larger semi-skilled workforce. Despite initial skepticism about strength, welded Liberty ships proved generally reliable, and much quicker to build. Efficient yard layout and equipment. Kaiser built new shipyards optimized for mass production, multiple parallel shipways to work on many ships at once, extensive crane coverage, and open spaces for sub-assembly. His yards looked unorthodox to traditionalists, but they were designed for speed. Focus on speed over perfection. Perhaps most importantly, Kaiser fostered a culture that valued good enough productivity over traditional craftsmanship. As one historian put it, Liberty ships weren't about being the best or most modern. It was about reducing design to simple forms so they could be replicated by workers without shipbuilding experience. Kaiser was willing to simplify designs and accept minor imperfections if it meant ships rolled off the line faster. This mindset was revolutionary in an industry that had long prized meticulous craftsmanship. A Liberty ship launching at a Kaiser shipyard, Oregon, 1944. As the newly built SS William Clark splashes into the water, a massive crane already swings the next ship's keel plate into place on the vacant way. Henry Kaiser's shipyards ran like assembly lines. As soon as one hull launched, work began on the next, keeping production continuous. Anyone can do it, mobilizing an unlikely workforce. To achieve such throughput, Kaiser needed people. Lots of people. Traditional shipbuilders relied on small pools of highly skilled craftsmen, often generations of shipwright families, concentrated in port cities. But on the west coast in 1941, there weren't enough trained ship workers to staff even one yard, let alone the multiple yards Kaiser was opening. Kaiser's solution was bold: recruit from everywhere and train on the job. He believed anyone could contribute if given proper training and a specific task. Thus the Kaiser shipyards became a grand social experiment, throwing open their gates to ordinary Americans from all walks of life. By late 1941, Kaiser's Richmond workforce swelled to over 10,000, and fewer than 200 had prior shipbuilding experience. This trend continued. At peak production, tens of thousands of newbie workers filled Kaiser's yards. Instead of lengthy apprenticeships, recruits got crash courses of a few weeks, then were assigned narrow, repetitive tasks on the assembly line. A former schoolteacher might become a welder running one type of seam weld. A taxi driver might be trained to operate a crane. Each worker became a specialist in one small job, gaining speed and confidence through repetition. This division of labor was very Ford-like, and it paid off in efficiency. Crucially, Kaiser's hiring practices were notably inclusive for the era. Facing wartime labor shortages, Kaiser did not hesitate to hire women in large numbers, as well as African Americans and other minority workers who were often excluded elsewhere. By 1943-44, thousands of women, popularly nicknamed Rosie the Riveters, even though in Kaiser's yards many were actually welders or crane operators rather than riveters, were employed in jobs once considered male-only. In Richmond alone, over 25% of Kaiser's workforce were women by mid-war, one of the highest proportions in the industry. At the shipways and prefab shops specifically, women made up as much as 40% of the labor force by 1943, including many black women despite resistance from some unions. Kaiser also brought in thousands of black workers from the segregated South, offering them skilled jobs and equal pay in defense work at a time when many other employers and unions resisted integration. Training and supporting these novice workers became a priority. Kaiser established on-site training schools for welding, blueprint reading, and other skills. He also understood that to attract people from across the country, he had to provide infrastructure. The Richmond shipyards, for example, came with worker housing projects, subsidized childcare centers for working mothers, company cafeterias, and even a pioneering healthcare plan, the origin of today's Kaiser Permanente healthcare system. To keep workers healthy, all of this was virtually unheard of in 1940, but it helped turn a raw group of recruits into a motivated, productive workforce. Working in the shipyards was still tough. The hours were long, conditions often noisy and dangerous, and social frictions existed, especially in other yards that weren't as progressive. But the experiment proved that with proper training and organization, ordinary Americans could do extraordinary things. As one historian noted, it wasn't always the idealized Rosie the Riveter image, but these yards paved the way for more equality in the workplace nationwide. The inclusion of women and minorities in industrial jobs during WWII sons was a watershed, and Kaiser's practices contributed significantly to that social change. A trainee welder works on the Liberty ship SS George Washington Carver at Kaiser's Richmond shipyard in 1943. Thousands of women like her joined the workforce as welders, burners, and crane operators, jobs traditionally held by men. Kaiser's open hiring and short training programs enabled unskilled workers to become productive shipbuilders in a matter of weeks, shattering production records. In the early months of Kaiser's shipbuilding program, there were growing pains. The very first Liberty ship built at Richmond in mid-1941 still took about 240 days, not much faster than older methods. But with each ship, the learning curve kicked in. The yard swiftly improved coordination and efficiency. By late 1941, Richmond was completing Liberty ships in under 100 days. By mid-1942, some were built in as little as 50 days. This was half a year faster than the initial builds, an astonishing improvement. The average construction time plummeted from around 200 plus days in 1941 down to upwards of 40 days in 1943. Industry-wide, before Kaiser's influence, the average had been about 230 days. Kaiser's methods cut that to just 6 weeks on average. As Kaiser's multiple yards, he eventually ran 7 major shipyards on the west coast, hit their stride. Their output dwarfed all expectations. At the height of production, American shipyards were launching about 3 Liberty ships per day, most of them built using Kaiser's mass production template. Between 1941 and 1945, a total of 2,610 Liberty ships were completed by 18 US shipyards, making it the largest single ship class ever built. Kaiser's own yards were especially prolific. Kaiser alone produced 1,490 ships, Liberties and other types, about 27% of all American vessels built in the war. This incredible surge of production helped ensure that Allied supply lines across the Atlantic and Pacific could keep pace with, and eventually far outpace, the losses inflicted by enemy submarines. The German U-boat campaign, which in 1942 had threatened to starve Britain, was essentially overwhelmed by sheer output by late 1943. As one Liberty ship captain quipped, "We were building them faster than the U-boats could sink them." Central to this success was Kaiser's knack for motivating his workforce to ever greater speeds. He fostered a spirit of friendly competition not only within each yard, rewarding teams that achieved milestones, but also between his different shipyards, and even against other companies' yards. In mid-1942, for example, Kaiser's Oregon shipbuilding yard in Portland set a new record by building the Liberty ship, SS Joseph N. Teal, in just 10 days from keel laying to launch. This feat made headlines and energized workers everywhere to ask, how much faster can we go? Admiral Land, initially wary of stunt ships, came to see value in these record attempts as morale boosters and proofs of concept. Every time a seemingly unbreakable barrier fell, it inspired all shipyards to push their limits. That competitive drive culminated in November 1942 with the SS Robert E. Peary, the 5-day ship. After the 10-day record was set in September, Kaiser's Richmond Yard No. 2 prepared to do the unthinkable, build a Liberty ship in under 5 days. They quietly stockpiled all needed components and prefabricated as much as humanly possible ahead of time. When the keel was laid just after midnight on November 8, 1942, literally everything was ready to go. Huge hull sections, complete with engines, boilers, and even some wiring pre-installed were standing by. Around the clock, crews worked in shifts to assemble the ship piece by piece in a continuous marathon. Observers watched in amazement as entire decks and bulkheads were swung into place by crane in hours, tasks that normally took weeks. By the 4th day, the ship was essentially finished, fully welded, engine in place, propeller attached, all major systems installed. On the afternoon of the 12th, day 412, amidst cheers, the SS Robert E. Peary was christened and launched down the ways. From keel laying to launch, 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes, and after just 3 more days of final fitting out dockside, the ship was delivered and commissioned. A total of 7 days, 14 hours from start to finish. This set a world record for the fastest construction of a sizable ocean-going ship, a record that still stands. News of the 5-day ship made headlines around the world. At a time when the outcome of WWII's was still uncertain, Kaiser's achievement sent a wave of optimism through the Allied nations. It dramatically demonstrated the power of American industrial might and innovation. The New York Times called it the epitome of US production genius, and workers took fierce pride in having done the impossible. Henry Kaiser humorously dubbed the Peary an incentive ship rather than a stunt. Its purpose was to inspire everyone to do better. Indeed, after November 1942, every shipyard was urged to adopt Kaiser's techniques to the fullest. The US Maritime Commission distributed manuals and sent engineers to study Kaiser's operations. Yards that had once derided Kaiser's methods began reorganizing to emulate them, lest they be left behind. One traditional East Coast shipbuilder, after touring Kaiser's production, admitted that Kaiser had achieved what our industry considered impossible by refusing to accept our limitations. We must either adopt his methods or accept irrelevance. In short, Kaiser had dragged shipbuilding into the 20th century and there was no going back. The arsenal of democracy at sea. The flood of Liberty ships and other vessels produced by Kaiser and his fellow shipbuilders became a decisive factor in the Allied war effort. Cargo ships aren't as glamorous as tanks or fighter planes, but they were the linchpin of logistics, carrying the food, fuel, troops, and munitions that enabled every front of the war. By mid-1943, the tonnage of new shipping being launched far exceeded the tonnage being lost to enemy action. The U-boat menace was essentially solved by production and improved naval tactics. As US Admiral Chester Nimitz later noted, "We fought a war across 5,000 miles of ocean, supplied by ships built faster than the enemy could sink them. Industrial capacity, not just military strategy, determined the outcome of World War II. The Liberty ships were the embodiment of that capacity. Not pretty or fast, but cheap, tough, and available in huge numbers. It's important to recognize that Liberty ships were meant to be disposable, emergency freighters, expected to last 5 years, yet they proved remarkably durable. Of the 2,710 Liberty ships built, only around 200 were lost during the war to U-boats, other enemy attacks, or storms, about 7%. The rest delivered their cargo and kept sailing. Many continued serving long after 1945, under various flags. In fact, a few Liberty ships are still around 80 years later. 2, the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, built in 56 days at South Portland, Maine, and the SS John W. Brown, built in 54 days at Baltimore, some survive today as museum ships, lovingly maintained and still operational. In a fitting tribute to their legacy, the Jeremiah O'Brien even steamed all the way from San Francisco to Normandy, France in 1994, to participate in the 50th anniversary of D-Day commemorations, a half-century after she had carried troops across the Channel on D-Day itself. Such stories underscore how solidly these throwaway ships were built, despite the breakneck schedules. Henry Kaiser's shipyards shut down after WWII. The nation suddenly had a surplus of ships, but the impact of what he pioneered endures to this day. The techniques of modular ship construction, welding, and assembly line efficiencies were adopted worldwide in the post-war era. Shipbuilding nations like Japan and South Korea, in rebuilding their industries, explicitly used mass production methods to become global leaders. Techniques directly descended from the Liberty ship program. Today, virtually every large ship, from container vessels to aircraft carriers, is built using prefabricated sections welded together, just as Kaiser proved feasible in 1942. Modern shipyards, with their huge gantry cranes and block assembly yards, are a living legacy of Henry Kaiser's innovation. Kaiser's success also left lessons in management and industrial engineering. Business scholars often cite the Liberty ship program as a classic case of the learning curve in action. As workers gained experience, each ship required fewer man-hours than the last. It showed how dramatically output can increase when a project scales up with proper training, simplification, and relentless focus on improvement. In 1943, Kaiser's yards averaged under 500,000 man-hours per ship, down from 1.4 million man-hours in 1941. This was not due to new technology so much as better organization and the empowerment of a willing workforce. Kaiser proved that many constraints are not absolute. They are just ingrained ways of thinking. When those assumptions are challenged, what was impossible can quickly become achievable. Finally, the social legacy of Kaiser's shipyards deserves mention. The wartime shipbuilding effort opened industrial employment to women and minorities on an unprecedented scale. Though many were pushed out of these jobs after 1945, the barrier had been broken. The contributions of Rosie the Riveter and her counterparts paved the way for greater inclusion in the labor force thereafter. Henry Kaiser's commitment to hiring anybody who can do the work and providing childcare and health benefits for workers were ahead of their time. These practices hinted at a more inclusive and supportive model of industrial employment that would gradually expand in the post-war decades. In the end, Henry J. Kaiser, the dam builder turned shipbuilder, became an unsung hero of the Allied victory. His vision of building ships like cars with unskilled workers and unprecedented speed was initially dismissed as folly. But Kaiser had a favorite saying, "Problems are only opportunities in work clothes." Facing the crisis of World War, he seized the opportunity to rewrite the rules of shipbuilding. The SS Robert E. Peary's 4-day construction was the most dramatic proof of concept, but it was just one highlight of a massive endeavor. Kaiser's shipyards ultimately delivered nearly 1,500 ships for the war, supplying the Allies and helping turn the tide in both Europe and the Pacific. Henry Kaiser may not be as famous as battlefield generals, but his influence on WWII was monumental. He showed what American industrial power, harnessed by innovative thinking, could accomplish. The Liberty ships, those ugly ducklings of the sea, became symbols of American productivity and resolve. And the man who built them faster than anyone had ever imagined left a legacy that transformed not only shipbuilding but the very idea of how quickly we can mobilize to meet a national challenge. Kaiser's story is a vivid reminder that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from outsiders who aren't afraid to challenge old assumptions. When Henry Kaiser took on shipbuilding, he achieved in months what others said would take years, and in doing so helped secure victory in the greatest conflict of the 20th century. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the wartime shipbuilding revolution. It's a story that shows how World War II was not only won on the battlefields, but also in the factories and shipyards back home. If you found this story interesting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating World War II history tales. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay curious and keep exploring history.